Appreciate you streaming in this morning on Birds 365 with Mac and Mac. Les Bowen joins us. Doing it from outside again. Another nice enough day to get out. We'll see if he's got the same birds that Chris Franklin has in his backyard. Les, appreciate you getting up early for us today. Here's where I want to open up, because John and I debated this pretty good yesterday. No one would debate that the Eagles' offense was better than the Eagles' defense this past week against the Commanders. Mm-hmm. Of the Eagles' defense, bigger issue, the second level or the third level? If we put the linebackers aside and say they played maybe their best game of the entire year, which was a bigger detriment to the Eagles' defense on Sunday? The front 5, 4, 5, however many you want to put up there, or the back 4 or 5, the corners / safeties, or the defensive line? Which you think had the biggest drop off on Sunday?
Oh, I thought the coverage was the problem, really. But you could certainly say, going into that game, we thought the Eagles had this huge advantage with their defensive line against the Commanders' offensive line. And it took a long time for that to become the case. It became the case in the second half. But the Commanders scored 17 points on their first 3 drives, and the Eagles weren't getting pressure at that point. But no, I wouldn't say in the game overall. I thought, the Eagles ended up with how many sacks? 5 or something?
5. 3 from Nicholas Morrow, who I like to call Lawrence.
The defensive line only got 2. The Eagles got 5, but the D line got 2.
Yeah, still, they're creating he's running through the vacancies created by people blocking the defensive line. So, the problem is on the back end. They're down to people that they just never thought at this point in the season would be playing. I think it's a temporary problem. I would guess they're going to have at least a couple guys back this week. I guess Sidney Brown probably, and Evans as well. But the slot corner thing is a problem. They can play with Bradbury in the slot and Josh Jobe outside. Josh Jobe isn't terrible. He's better than some corners they've had there, God knows, over the last several years before they got this set up with Slay and Bradbury. But he's not optimal. He's not as good as Bradbury. And, I would look for, as we look toward the trading deadline, I'd try to find a slot corner somewhere. And it doesn't have to be, some star that you're plucking off somebody's, just a useful player, somebody that is maybe sitting on a practice squad that can help you. I don't know. A few years ago, guys like Crevon LeBlanc, you remember him?
Oh, don't bring him up, Les. The fans love Crevon. They're still talking about bringing him back.
He's
Strap, baby.
Been out of the league for a while now. But I mean, a young guy like somebody in the situation he was in Detroit when the Eagles found him, or Epps, when they did that. A few years. That's
him up
what
off waivers.
That's what you look for. I can't imagine they're going to, grab anybody's starting slot corner at the trade. Maybe they will, but I think that's unlikely. But yeah, that's where the problem really lies. I was disappointed in the front 5. I thought it was their worst game in terms of, you barely noticed Jalen Carter at all. Davis, Fletcher Cox was really the best of the group, I thought.
I thought Brandon was really good.
Yeah, Brandon was great. Yeah, Brandon plays very limited snaps.
Yeah.
I mean, and based on that game, he might have to play more.
Yeah.
It was not what I expected from the Eagles front, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that's the expectation of the front is so much more than the secondary. Even with Slay and Bradbury. Although I think Slay had his worst game of the season as well.
Yeah.
Which is
I just think there was a lot of confusion back there, John.
Yeah.
I think there were guys playing the wrong coverages. And
the communication. This defense drives me nuts, Les, because it's all based on communication, those zone coverages on the back end. And when you have new pieces or younger players who don't know what they're doing,
right?
Yeah, then Slay looks like he's getting beat. Maybe he isn't. Then he talks about it. you don't know ball. and he, you know,
according to Slay never gets beat.
Yeah,
there's always
that's
an
part of his
explanation attached to everything.
And, that's okay. But
yeah,
what I think happens in a lot of those situations is he's trying to get somebody else like, no, you know, and meanwhile his guy is.
That's true. That is very true. Jody can tell you. I complain about that. That's the biggest thing I hate with this defense is its impact on young defensive backs, because with Bradbury and Slay, yeah, they're good. They're good. Yeah. They have no issues, and they communicate and they pass people off. And then you see a new piece come in, and it's like a fire drill.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and
with Joe, by the way, that much more credit to Reed Blankenship, because he's still a young quarterback. He didn't even think he was going to make the team last year. Got a hand fed into games, and he looks like a grizzled veteran of 5 years out there playing. So you're right about the Eagles, and it's tough to bring young DBs into this system. Not Reed Blankenship. He's just that good.
Yeah. The whole NFL should be ashamed of themselves for missing on Reed Blankenship, because he's a really good player. He really is. And in a lot of ways, he saved that game last, back-to-back plays. Yeah. Also,
God, yes.
You know, it's a special year, Les. It might be. The Eagles don't play any 1 o'clock games. Yeah. And they needed less cameras. I still think McLaurin was in. If that's a primetime game, they have more cameras. They probably have a better angle. Marcus Mariota got his head in the way.
Yeah.
I think he caught the football.
Well, you might be right, except so his foot is on top of Blankenship's hand.
Yeah, Reed did a great job to make
When did it touch the ground in bounds?
I don't know, but if we have more angles, if we can get around Marcus's head.
The foot is on top of a guy's arm. That doesn't count.
No.
I don't think. I think he has to, excuse the expression, touch grass.
Yeah, and we're talking about the toes coming down.
Yeah.
But I just think if you have those high-def Sunday Night Football cameras, they probably have a better angle. You probably get a clear view. And I know and I tell Jody this. How many times do we say, oh, Devontae Smith didn't catch that, and he somehow gets his toes in? Great receivers.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, but they always get their toes in. And I say, no way.
That's one of the remarkable developments of HD replay in the last 20 years or so. When we were growing up, guys were ruled out of bounds.
Yeah.
All the time. You almost never saw, one of those toe tap catches. Everybody always assumed, because it always looks like, to the naked eye, the guy's 10 yards out of bounds.
Yeah.
And then you go back and look up. Yeah, he got him down. Yeah. And you didn't used to ever see that. It just wasn't part of the game.
Yeah. Devontae's amazing.
If on the play in question, we had that better angle that you're talking about, better ISO camera, might have shown more definitively that he was out of bounds.
It's possible. It's possible. I am relying on Terry McLaurin, how good he is. He's one of those guys that tends to get the toes down. I just think, and Marcus's best play of the year. He got his head right in front of it from the back.
See, let it be on the record that John McMullen brought up Marcus Mariota before Jordy McDonald, because if Marcus Mariota has to go into a game this week because Jalen Hurts happens to get injured, John McMullen brought up Marcus. I have not mentioned the Eagles' backup quarterback.
He did a great job. Obfuscating the camera. He did a great job. He did a tremendous
Will he do a great job if he actually has to take a snap this weekend against the Rams? I didn't want a guy to put that jinx out there. I'm glad you did. Thank you very much for that, Johnny Mac. All right, let me ask you about the linebacker play, because this was something John and I debated yesterday too. He looked up the PFF numbers. Apparently, PFF doesn't reduce someone's grade because he's playing in front of a very good defensive line. Nicholas Morrow, second-ranked linebacker in the National Football League.
Yeah, baby. Guess who number one is, by the way? Guess who? Wild guess.
Yeah, Roquan
Smith. The Chicago Bears paid $100 million for all-ball linebackers. They had Roquan Smith and Nick Morrow last year. They're 1-2. Now, obviously, Roquan's a very good player. But
yeah, the only reason I know that is Clay Harbor tweeted it yesterday. He lives in Chicago now.
Yes, he's a Chicago guy.
That was his point. It's like, what the?
Yeah.
But with Morrow, I guess the sacks and all that, I don't know what their grading system is. Morrow's playing just fine. I don't know that
he's playing really well. I'd
probably rather have Fred Warner myself, but
so would I.
Okay, yeah.
But I will say this, because Seth Joyner brought it up on our post-game show last, and I dismissed it, and I'm starting to rethink it. I have to admit, Nicholas is playing very well. Seth brought up, at some point, is he going to Wally Pip Nakobe Dean? And I went, no, that's not going to happen. And I see you're the same way. Did we give too much deference to Nakobe Dean? What has Nakobe Dean done other than in Athens, Georgia, where Nick Morrow's out there making plays?
They drafted him, Howie Roseman runs this thing. And, they drafted Nakobe Dean to do that. And they really haven't had a good look at him yet. I don't think they're going to I don't think they're that good that they can just, bench Nakobe Dean.
But I'm saying if he keeps, and I dismissed it too. So, don't get me wrong. I completely dismissed it when Seth brought it up. But if he keeps playing like this, why are you defaulting to Nakobe Dean?
Because you drafted him to do this, and they think that he's this great leader and the shot caller and all that for the defense. But I don't know. I'm arguing against. I was skeptical, the beginning of the season. That was kind of one of my points, was they're depending on this guy that didn't play last year, really. And I've never liked his size, frankly. And when he got injured, I mentioned that, and people are, oh, it's his foot. You can't say it's his size. Blah, blah, blah. Well, I just think a small linebacker is going to get injured more wherever, whether it's his foot or his ear or whatever, But I think they've got a lot invested in Nakobe Dean in terms of their, structure and their.
Yeah, and I think he's a better player. I mean, Nick will probably go out. That's the thing about players in this league. You can have a great game, but the great players are consistent. He might go out in Los Angeles, have a terrible game.
Yeah. And Kazir White this time last year looked like a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
And then down the stretch, he really didn't, and he's not a bad player, but he wasn't as good as his first several games with the Eagles. Seemed to show.
I look at this differently than either Seth Joyner or John McMullen. Seth is like, did he get Wally pipped? In other words, Nakobe gets healthy, sits on the bench. John said, not even happening because they're committed. As Les just said, they're committed. Here's my question. Why can't linebacker be a rotational position? They use so many darn defensive linemen in and out, and somehow they find snaps for Derek Barnett. But last year when Nakobe Dean was on his team, he got 30 snaps for the entire year. They just refuse to put him in there. They have their two guys. They stay with their two guys. Now, this is a new defense coordinator, and maybe they'll look at things differently. Why can't linebacker be a rotational position as well?
And, in fact, you see that. You remember Christian Ellis and how important he was several weeks ago to this defense?
Yeah.
Guess how many linebacker snaps he got Sunday?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
He played on special teams. You're right. That is how I don't know that there's the green dot thing. John, you're more up on this than I am because you're actually working and I'm retired. But how many green dots do you get? Like
you can have as many as 3 during the game, but
that's probably part of it. They probably don't want to have that guy, that captain sort of, the communicator changing back and forth all the time. But I don't know. That's it is interesting. That's one of the first things I noticed when I looked at the playing time yesterday was, Christian Ellis doesn't play anymore.
When Nakobe got hurt, I believe they split it. I believe they gave it to Christian Ellis.
Yeah.
And then when Christian wasn't in, they played a lot of dime that game. Reed Blankenship took it.
Right.
And now they've given it to Nick Morrow, and he's played well, so they haven't had a need to take it off him. Yeah, I mean, I'm, I've always said if you're on the field and you're playing well, they're not taking you off. I don't know if that's the case here, and
it'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't think we're that close to finding out. I don't get any sense. When can Nakobe come back? It's
next week.
He's got one more game.
Yeah. Do you see any sense that is he out there?
Well, I heard 4 to 6 weeks, so it's not. He could be out a couple, and you might even manipulate it that way. If Nick continues to play well in Los Angeles, you might say, "All right, take your time, Nakobe, and wait for the bad game. You wait for the shoe to drop, and then you bring him back." But if he doesn't have a bad game, it's going to be interesting.
It really will. You're right.
Yeah. It is.
Les, I need your take on this. John and I are well on record that we think Howie Roseman is probably still underrated. As good a job as he's done, and around the league, I think he gets a lot of props. But there are some still guys who question him here in Philadelphia because he wasn't a football guy. But here's one where I got a question. How much credit do we give Howie Roseman for Nick Morrow? Because he's the second-ranked linebacker in the league right now. The Eagles cut him. They said, "See you later, bye." They signed him to a free agent contract, a very team-friendly free agent contract with no guaranteed money, which was a very good job by Howie Roseman. I give him a nod for that. But can you now take a bow for Nicholas Morrow being the second best linebacker in the NFL when you cut him coming into the season? That kind of gets
I hadn't thought about that,
carpet, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not giving him credit. I'll tell you that. I'm not giving him credit.
I'd give the bow, if there is a bow to be given, I'd give it to the scout that I'm sure Howie wasn't the guy pouring over the film saying, this Nicholas Morrow guy might help us, So I don't know.
Here's who I'll give the credit to. Nicholas Morrow.
That's a good person to give
There's a new idea. Let's actually give the credit to the player who's playing as highly
I mean, you can't cut a guy. And remember, not only did they cut him, they didn't sign him immediately to the practice squad. Now, that might have been
he went home.
Nick. Yeah, that might have been him.
That might have been Nick saying, "All right, let me wait and see if somebody needs a linebacker on a 53." So it could have been from his end too. But they didn't even bring him back right away on the practice squad. As you mentioned, Les, he went home and, then he came back and he's forced into action and he's playing well. I can't give Howie too much credit for that. Nick Morrow does deserve the credit. But it is interesting, and I think we can already fast forward to April and curtail the linebacker talk in the first and second round. Because I mentioned this to Jody on text message. He's emboldened by this. Oh, I can put anybody at linebacker. Zach Cunningham showed up in August. Nick Morrow, I cut him. I brought him back. Bam.
I wouldn't rule second round out. I mean, they've done that. They haven't done it recently. They used to do it a lot, actually. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, they used to draft second round linebackers quite a bit. Just what they wouldn't do it first round. I would not, I don't know what Sean Desai really thinks, but I think he'll have a lot to do with that discussion. I wouldn't rule out a second round linebacker. They need to. Nakobe Dean was third round and probably could have gone higher. I think they do want to lay a foundation there at some point.
Yeah, they drafted Davion in the third round, didn't work out. It's not like they won't take a premium pick on a linebacker. They've done it 2 times over the past few years.
Just won't do first round.
No.
I get to, when I was still working, I got to roll out the Jerry Robinson story the first time I called him was like 10 years ago, and he had no idea. He was like amazed. Wow, really?
Yeah.
But he's still on, you can still get hold of Jerry anytime you want to do that story.
Yeah. And Jerry, ironically, Jerry was a hell of a player. It worked out.
Great player. Yeah.
Tremendously. But yeah,
he had played for the head coach at UCLA, so
yeah, they knew him quite well. You mentioned his name. Give me your read. 4 games in, Sean Desai. Good job, okay job, to be determined job. What the hell is he thinking job? Certainly it's different. And how many times John and I talked about this all summer? There'll be differences. You'll be able to see the difference between Gannon. We know that the head coach has his beliefs in defenses, and that's one of the reasons why Desai got the job. We knew it wasn't going to be a drastic change, but you could see where he would put his own touches on it.
Right.
Do you like the touches that Jonathan Gannon, Sean Desai has added to Jonathan Gannon's former defense?
Until Sunday, I thought he was doing an excellent job. Sunday was not great, but again, the back end was a mess. You certainly can't complain about blitzing anymore. He does he blitzed a lot Sunday, and they do blitz a lot more than they did under Jonathan Gannon. I don't have any huge issues with, they wanted a Vic Fangio type defense. I think what John was alluding to a little while ago, there are some things about that sort of defense that you might not like, but that's what they're going to play. So, there's no discussion to really be had there. I can't complain about him. I think Sunday aside, they've done a very good job. I want to see. The first thing I thought of when I didn't notice Jalen Carter Sunday was, is he starting to get tired, or is he getting a little off the beam focus-wise? I want to make sure that he keeps these young guys in a 17-game NFL season. Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter were kind of the engine there for a few weeks. Is that going to be the case, long term, or are they going to kind of slide back a little bit? Jordan Davis did last year, but yeah, I makes sense to me so far. How do you guys feel? I'm okay with it.
I like the way he tries different things when things aren't going to plan. You mentioned the blitzing. He blitzed more than he has all season against Washington. I think that's because Sam Howell, right?
Yeah, and it worked in the second half. It worked.
Yeah, so I think that made a lot of sense. They were at, I was just looking it up, 30.4% blitz rate, way up from what they typically do. They're 21st in the league in blitzing. I was trying to look. I don't know where they were last year. I'm trying to look at. They were 22.1% blitz rate last year, 22.8% this year. And the only reason they're ahead is because of Sunday's game. So I don't think that's changed as much as people think. Still very similar from that.
Maybe they do a better job of it this year. You certainly
they certainly did on Sunday. Yeah, we talked about it. I mean, Nick Morrow had 3,600 NFL snaps somewhere in that range, and he had 4 career sacks. He had 3 sacks on Sunday. So they were very effective. So that part is certainly true. I don't think he's got as much talent on defense, so that has to factor into it. Now, I'm talking about the back 7, not the front 7. The front 7's unbelievable. Front 4, defensive front. So it's kind of, I don't know where you want to grade him, but I like his ability to think out of the box, like Bradbury in the slot. I don't like it. I don't think it makes sense, but I respect his ability to think, all right, let me do some different things to try to fix this. Like I want to play an all-pro corner outside. That's why I'm paying him $13 million. So I don't necessarily agree with it, but I like, if I'm making sense, I like.
Well, given the choices that he has, I think Job on the outside is better than, you saw what happened when you tried to play Mario Goodrich. Inside. Yeah. I think he thinks, okay, Bradbury can do this and Job can play outside. I don't have a problem with him trying to do it that way, given that that's what he has to work with.
Yeah. I like the willingness to try different things. And he did that in training camp. You saw him when he was dropping Nolan Smith or which didn't work out as well. But I like the willingness to throw the curveball. I am concerned though, Mario Goodrich you bring up, Les. So let's talk about him. He didn't play well when he was forced into action against Minnesota. But I mean, that's a good passing team. They haven't been good this year, but they can throw the ball. If you're not going to play him, why is he here? Like
he's on special teams, I guess. But he's just kind of like Ellis. He's like not in the scheme anymore.
And like this week, all of a sudden, you have the Sua injury. You don't have a backup center. People have Cam Jurgens is the backup center, not only is he the starting right guard. So you have to elevate people. They already have to elevate the punter. Britton Covey's out because he got a concussion, and no player in the entire NFL has been able to get through the protocol in 1 week. So
I hadn't noticed that. I read that last night. I hadn't. That you didn't used to be the case.
No,
I can tell you that
they've gotten way more stringent. So you might have to elevate Greg Ward. Who's going to be the backup center? Landon Dickerson?
I would guess so. Yeah, I think that's what you have to do. It'll be interesting because he hasn't done that in a while. I'm sure they're going to work on that in practice this week.
Now, do you just rely on Kelsey's always there, so Kelsey's going to play and just cross your fingers?
I don't know what else you would do.
Well, you can go Brett Toth, Julian Good-Jones, but you'd have to elevate them.
Got to elevate them.
They have some other elevation issues. Or you could put Braden Mann on the 53. They could do that early.
That might be something you want to do, really. If you think he hasn't punted well.
No, he hasn't punted well.
If you thought he was your punter, then you would do that, But I don't know. I do think, though, we're seeing again the biggest thing, even though the Eagles are 4-0, the biggest thing that keeps teams from getting back when they've been there is injuries. And we've already seen there was another stat that I read that last year the Eagles offensive line missed a piddling amount of games. I think it was like 3 or 4 games total. 2 guys had like 1 or 2 game injuries. Well, now you've got Jurgens. He's probably going to be down for 8 weeks, at least something like that.
Well, they can put if it's going to be that long, they'll just put him on IR. And then at least you create a roster spot.
Right. But my point is, you're seeing these injuries now this year, with Avonte Maddox. You're seeing these injuries that in so far not to Jalen Hurts yet or A.J. Brown or, Darius Slay, but you're seeing the injury thing creep in and it's already a bigger deal than it was last year.
All right, last thing for me, and I've got an issue with the coach.
Okay.
It might be an uh-oh. Yeah, our streamers are going to have to decide for themselves. During the offseason, I remember vividly the coach talking about his quarterback after he signed the big contract. And they asked him about Jalen running the football. And his quote was, "Why would I take away his superpower?" Quote unquote. That's what Nick Sirianni said when asked about Jalen running the ball now that he's a $250 million guy. Why would I take away his superpower? Well, in watching the first 4 games, I would say his superpower at best has been reduced, if not taken away. And yesterday, Nick specifically went out of his way to say, we emphasize that he protect himself, that we want him to protect himself as a runner. Well, which one is it, Coach? Are you not going to take away his superpower, or are you going to reduce his superpower? I think there's a conflict of interest here.
Right. He had that one good 24-yard scramble late Sunday. That was it. I mean, and the design quarterback runs are just a disaster right now.
Yeah.
Because he sort of tiptoed, in my view, and maybe I'm being totally unfair, but in my view, he tiptoes up to the line, and the first time he sees the defender, he sits down. They ran a quarterback draw, and he wanted no part of it. I mean, it looked like to me, and maybe that's a really, unsophisticated view, but I don't. This is a question that I have. I mean, Jalen Hurts played a great game in many respects Sunday. His passing was tremendous. The 2 touchdowns, the yardage, it was kind of back to normal, what we were kind of expecting going into the season. But this business of just sitting down at the line of scrimmage is not what we expected going into the season. I don't expect him to lower his head and bull through linebackers, but he isn't right now. He looks like one of those traditional quarterback kind of guys that doesn't run, and every now and then he shakes it off and goes, but it's, even if he's like scrambling, he'll just run out of bounds after 1 yard or something, I mean, it's like he doesn't want to do this, or he thinks he shouldn't do this. And I'm not sure he's Jalen Hurts, playing this way.
At Les Bowen, make sure you follow Les on X. He's retired, but not totally. You got to listen to the Bowen on the Birds podcast each week, wherever you get your finer podcasts. Les, any big names coming up? You always get big names, Les.
I haven't set up this week yet. They've got the Rams, so I have a couple people in LA that I'd like to touch base with. It's going to be tough from getting an Eagles writer this week, because I think they scheduled locker room right in the middle of my podcast.
Yeah.
How can they? Don't they know who I am? But I'll figure something out.
Okay. At Les Bowen, and they do know. They probably are trying to tweak you, Les. I think they tweak us all the time with this schedule, and they do things the way they do things purposefully at times. That's a hat tip to Howie Roseman. Well done, Howie. Bowen on the Birds. Last one. Who's going to win the game? We're not going to talk about you. Are they going to 5-0? They always find ways to win. You got to give them credit. They've looked disjointed at times, but there's only 2 teams, Les, that are 4-0. 21-1 we are now over the last 22 starts, I believe, with Jalen Hurts.
In the immediate aftermath of that Sunday game, I would have said they're losing next week. This is going to, they can't go on like this. It's going to bite them in the butt. The Rams, I don't know.
They're better than I thought.
Yeah, but I don't.
Yeah, they're not good.
No,
and by the way, that place is going to be what, 50,000 Eagles fans?
Yeah,
at least
exactly.
More than half.
Yeah. So I haven't made a pick yet, but I might end up picking the Eagles, maybe not to cover, but the cowardly.
And Matthew Stafford's banged up. He got hurt last week. I think he's.
And I don't like their offensive line very much. So I don't know. They could lose. I mean, the way they're playing right now, the Eagles, they could lose, but you have to think they're the better team, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake Elliott game-winning field goal. That's all you need to know. When in doubt,
we didn't even bring up Jake.
And Jake out there to kick the game-winning field goal. You got that in your back pocket. All right, here's my last question, Les, because, again, like John said, we're not going to have you on between now and next week. I don't know if we'll probably have you on at least once before the trade deadline. 3 choices, A, B, C. A, Derek Barnett is still here 4 weeks from now. B, Derek Barnett is traded for some draft compensation, even if it's a 6th in exchange for a 7th or somewhere there. And that's all I think they're going to get. Or the Eagles finally say, yeah, we just need to move on. We kind of need the roster spot. And we actually think more of Contavious Street than Derek Barnett, because Contavious Street is performing more than Derek Barnett. He might not be as ingratiated with the organization as Derek Barnett is, but if they pull that curtain back and go, who's actually helping us more, it's Contavious Street. If we got to cut somebody because we got roster issues like McMullen and McDonald are always talking about on Birds 365, Derek, sorry, we got to let you go. Which of those 3 things is most likely to happen? He's here and he's still getting his unproductive snaps. He's traded for some minimal compensation, or he's told your service is no longer needed. A, B, or C?
I think he got more snaps Sunday than he's been getting lately. Of course, they played 78 defensive snaps. That might have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
I like your trade scenario. If anybody wants him, I don't know who that would be, but there's
a lot of bad teams out there. A lot of
that's
bad
really true. There are teams
yeah.
he could play for. There's no doubt about that. I'll go with the trade scenario. I don't know. They don't seem to have a problem running him out there. So I'm skeptical that we'll be right about that. But I'd prefer the trade scenario.
I think everybody would, but I said a 7th for a 6th. Not even just a 7th round pick, but you get a 6th in exchange for a 7th. That's about how much he's worth on the trade market.
Yeah.
If some team gets desperate, maybe you can pull that off, Howie Roseman. But don't be expecting massive returns. We always get massive returns when we bring Les Bowen on our show. Les, thank you much for doing it today.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Les.
Our pleasure. In front of the red brick wall, he is Les Bowen.
Remember the old days? We would be in front of the Comedy Store brick wall.
Red brick background.
For the great Ocean Casino Resort backgrounds.
And I like the red brick, but I got to tell you, it's not the Ocean's Casino. I like being down the shore better than being in front of the red brick. But
much better. Speaking of bad football teams, how bad are the New York Football Giants? My God, what? They played one good quarter of football. That's it. I even said yesterday they can't play as poorly as they have been playing. Oh yeah, they can.
Oh,
they were even worse.
They can, and they did. Their offensive line is a sieve. And Aikman made the point last night on the broadcast, which was dead on accurate. I've been making it for years, going back to their previous general manager, Dave Gettleman. The first thing he said, I was on the air in New York the day that he was hired, as a matter of fact, or he did his introductory press conference. And he used a word that I had never heard before, hog mollies.
Hog mollies, yeah.
Referring to guys in the trenches. Oh, by the way, Eagles' big hog molly squad. They don't call it that, but they are. They believe you build from the trenches out, and that's exactly what Gettleman said. We need to get ourselves some hog mollies up front. And from the time he took over into him being gone, the Giants have tried.
Yeah, they
have put resources and allocations into the offensive line, but you gotta kind of be able to pick the right guys, and they don't ever. Their offensive line is a sieve. It's terrible, and it's not because they ignore it. No, they have attempted to fix it many different times in many different ways. They just stink at picking the right players.
Jeff Stoutland. I mean, you're right. Evan Neal. I mean, what the hell happened to Evan Neal? That's a talented kid. I mean, it's not like, the Giants picked him, 7th overall, and nobody else was going to take him. I mean, he was a big-time player coming out of college. Andrew Thomas has turned into, that's it. I remember they drafted Will Hernandez in the 2nd round. He did nothing. They've tried, and they can't develop offensive
money
linemen.
on who's the free agent offensive lineman they got from New England? Paid him. I think they made him the highest paid guard when they signed him in free agency 3 or 4 years ago. Slater? What was the name of the kid? It was former Patriot. And they paid him good money. They went aggressively after him in free agency, and he stunk. He came to New York and went from being a borderline all-pro guy in New England, and he couldn't even keep his job in New York. So you are so right, John, when you say Stoutland University. It's not only evaluation and being able to acquire the right player. Then you got to be able to coach him up and get the most out of him. And Stoutland does that better.
I'm just looking. They this year they took John Michael Schmitz in the 2nd round. Matt Pert a couple years ago in the 3rd round. You met Neal and Thomas are high level 1st round picks. Thomas has worked out. They took another kid in the 3rd round. I mean, they're taking a bunch. Half of their offensive line is either 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round picks, and
day 1, day 2.
They stink. Yeah,
they're just flat out terrible, and that's a good thing because the Eagles got them twice. Now, I'd like to be playing them now if I were the Eagles because they're struggling so badly right now, and maybe they get better before weeks 15 and 18 because that's when the Eagles play them. They don't play them until December/January, but Yeah, I don't think I think the Giants are a complete non-factor in the division this year. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. We are your Mac and Mac guys. Quickie timeout. Come back. We've got Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philadelphia scheduled to join us in just over 10 minutes. Stay there.